For the past week or the protests have been rambling on inside Iran, originally triggered by sharp decline in the Iran currency. The protests quickly spiraled out into the wider anti-government protests, provoking a vicious reaction from Iran's security service. The protest seems to be intensifying rather than mulling. So in this video, we thought we would take a look at the latest round of protests and whether they can finally force regime change or not. While these protests are obviously occurring in the context of widespread dissatisfaction at the regime, their approximate cause was a sharp devaluation of Iran currency. The rial, which is managed by central bank. For context, in late December, the real exchange rate fell to all-in time of law about 1.4 million to the US dollar, down from about $8,000 to the dollar in June. This devaluation was in part of reflection of the fact that thanks to the combination of war and sanction, the Iran economy just isn't doing great at the moment, with the World Bank forecasting a contraction of 1.7% in 2024 and then 2.8% in 2026. It is also a consequence of the fact that the oil revenues, Iran's main source of foreign currency and thus one of the key determinants of the real value, have been falling recently, both because of falling global prices and reduced demand from China, which has long been Iran's biggest buyer. But as well as this economics factor, there was also apparently a political angle to the valuation. According to some analysts, Iran exporters had started to doubt that the central bank would be able to maintain existing exchange rate and were thus refusing to convert their foreign currency earning into real until they offered a better exchange rate, despite the fact they're obliged to do. This is why, while the devaluation wasn't popular with basically everyone, given inflation is already running at about 50%, it was particularly unpopular with Iran merchant classes. They felt the big exporters, which are generally well connected, or state-owned companies, had essentially blackmailed the central bank into allowing a devaluation at the expense of a smaller business who really they felt that big exporters, which are generally well connected, or state-owned companies, had essentially blackmailed the central bank into allowing a devaluation at the expense of a smaller business who rely more on import. Anyway, this is why protests originated in market and bazaar, with the first protest kicking off among shopkeepers in Tehran Grand Bazaar on December 28th, before spreading to other bazaar and universities across the country. The protests quickly spread across the country, with the protests popping up across the north and west, but they were ordinarily pretty small scale and mostly focused on economic issues. At this point, the protests more resembled the 28th protests, which were led by merchants and students, but remained mostly peaceful. However, things escalated dramatically on December 23. At this point, protests more resembled the 28th protests, which were led by merchants and students, but remained most peacefully. However, things escalated dramatically on December 31, and when security forces opened fire on protesters in a number of routes, including a number of fatalities. Unfortunately for Ayatollah, this vicious crackdown by security services apparently backfired, and several funerals for silent protesters transformed into violent anti-regime protests on January 1 and 2nd. This is when the US President Donald Trump started talking about intervening on behalf of the protesters, warming via tourist social media the United States of America is quite locked and loaded. These more violent protests then spread from rural areas to town and to the big Iran cities, and video posted on social media over the past couple of days have shown the protesters battling with the Iran security service in Tehran. The breadth of the protesters is pretty stunning. There have now been at least sporadic protests in almost every urban settlement in Iran. And this respect, protests are beginning to look less like 28 protests are more like the protests we saw in 2022 and 2023 after the death of Mahsa Amini at the hand of Iran's so-called mortality police, which quickly escalated into national-wide protests explicitly aimed at toppling the regime. So what is next? Well, history doesn't bode well for protesters. We have seen recurrent anti-government protests in Iran since really early in 2010, reliably accompanied by excited chatter about the imminent prospect of regime change. There were the 2009 protests after Mohammad Ahmadid claimed victory in presidential election, despite several reported irregularity, followed by further protests in 2010 and 2011 and 2012. There were the pro-monarchy siders